new to clojureD this year. And because we're a little bit in time, we're just going to go right into the first talk that you're all here to see. And that is going to be Peter Strömberg. And Peter is going to talk about Calva, his editor extension for VS Code, which really brings the power of Clojure to like a very popular platform that is Visual Studio Code, and really shows off the powers of working with a REPL, working with data, and all that kind of stuff we love about Clojure in this really good, user-friendly package. And with that, I give it up for Peter. Please share your questions in the GatherTown chat or in the Slack clojureD channel, and we'll do a Q&A afterwards, at which we will discuss those questions with Peter. Please enjoy Peter Strömberg.
Hi there, clojureD. I am Peter Strömberg, also known as PES. 3 years ago, when I was all new to Clojure, I created Calva to make my favorite editor help me in exploring this new wonderful programming language. Visual Studio Code is the favorite editor of a growing lot of people for very good reasons. It is super easy to use, and it is also very powerful. For instance, to edit a file, you type on the keyboard. That might sound crazy to some of you, but it actually works. And you also don't need to relearn anything in order to save a file, to select text, cutting, pasting, searching, replacing, anything like that. The same could of course be said about Notepad, but VS Code also brings superb developer ergonomics. And it is growing power every minute because it is very easy to extend to do whatever you fancy it should do. So here's an idea. People should be able to stay with VS Code to do Clojure things. With Calva, we take this idea and we run with it. I am a huge fan of spontaneous order in the way Art Carden formulates it. Spontaneous order is a pattern of action among diverse individuals in a process of trial and error rather than through top-down central planning. This is how the Clojure ecosystem works. People take on whatever task or mission they find is worthwhile, and they run with it. No one is directing. People may have grand plans, but those plans don't matter as much as what they do to carry out the plans and the ripple effects that might have. Perhaps making someone else find a task or a mission to run with. So, giving VS Code an environment that offers a warm welcome to Clojure is a mission worthwhile. But I had nothing like that on mind when I first created Calva. That was for much more mundane reasons. I found Clojure and I immediately fell in love with it. And I then needed something that my not so powerful computer could cope with. It could cope with VS Code. And I like VS Code and I love to hack on things. So what is Calva? That question has several layers, one of which is what we want it to be. So we want Calva users and the Clojure community at large to be assured that Calva comes with support, that it is being actively developed, and that we know what we want it to be. We, as in Brandon and I. We also want to make it so that the path from you're curious about Clojure until you have its REPL hooked into the code of your editor to be as fast as possible and as smooth as possible. Wielding the REPL should be super easy. And Calva should also be competent enough so that you can stay with it when you grow into a Clojure developer. We don't want the VS Code Clojure journey to begin with that you need to assemble your development environment. Therefore, Calva is pretty complete. So let's take another look at what Calva is. At a high level, this is how Calva is built. If we start with a Clojure document here, so if we start rather with a VS Code document, they have always a corresponding Clojure document. And these Clojure documents, they are powered by something we call a token cursor. And by using this token cursor, the Clojure document always know about the structure of the Clojure code, which is what makes them Clojure document. The Clojure documents are quite full-featured virtual editors. They support selections, inserts, deletes, changes, and also infinite undo and redo. And you can hook these Clojure documents on any editor actually. Of course, we have hooked them on the Clojure VS Code text editor here. And any VS Code document, then any change to VS Code document is mirrored down to its Clojure document and vice versa. And if any edit is of structural nature, then it is also always used and done via the Clojure document and up to the VS Code document. I could go on about these Clojure documents and their token cursor because it is amazing and fun tech. And it powers a lot of Calva's capabilities, such as structural editing, structural highlighting, rainbow parents, rainbow vertical guides, and what have you. It also makes Calva always know what the current form is, and the current top-level form, and the current defined thing in the top-level form, and so on. This is used in many ways, and one of them is to target Calva's formatter on the actual code you are editing right now, making the formatting very efficient, and it always keeps your code formatted that way. So with Calva, you seldom need to format the whole document. Knowing about the current form and the current top-level form is great when the user wants to evaluate those. Which brings us to the REPL. Those Clojure editors are hooked into the application using another piece of amazing tech, nREPL, and in Calva's case, a lot of cider nREPL. Did you know that Calva is distilled from cider? nREPL makes it easy for Calva to let the user evaluate code, and for Calva to take the results back in a structured way and do something interesting with them. Cider nREPL powers features such as navigation, documentation lookup, code completion, function signature help, the debugger, the test runner, and so on. And to make the actual connection between the editor and the running application as easy as possible for the user, we have spent a lot of time to make Calva help install the application in a Calva compatible way. In taking inspiration from cider again, we call this jacking, and it has made a world of difference in the kinds of help we need to provide to beginning Clojurians. Recently, we integrated Clojure LSP, bringing powerful static analysis to Calva, including refactoring and linting. This means that you don't even need to start the application in order to efficiently browse its code, which is great for those times when you're not working actively with the project, but you might need to look something up quickly. Maybe you are processing a PR or something like that. Once you have started the application though, then Calva offers you the sum of what static and dynamic analysis offers. As you can see, Calva is built from many other Clojure development tooling projects, but it is much more to it than that we are using these other projects. Calva is much more of a big teamwork, sometimes quite synchronous even. From the start of the Calva project, both Botsi Darbatsov and Thomas Heller has given it a lot of their attention. They are not just stewarding and maintaining their fantastic projects like nREPL and shadow CLJs are in isolation. They are certainly helping us a lot to figure how to configure things and how to best leverage their projects. And they are always on the ready to tweak things on their end if our project needs something for their projects to work better with our thing. Ottedar and Thomas have from Calva day one been my role models when it comes to open source stewardship. And to this list of role models, I would like to add Case Nelson, Eric Dallow, and Mickey Borkent, whose projects Calva has come to increasingly depend on. And let's not forget the role of rewrite CLJ here. A lot of Clojure development tooling relies on it. This certainly goes for Clojure LSP, CLJ, Condo, Clojure format, and by all those proxies, Calva. But the tooling has suffered a bit from that Clojure rewrite CLJ lost the attention from its creator that it needed. And also from the fact that the Clojure script implementation was a separate and also abandoned project. Again, the community has proven capable of taking care of its projects. Under the umbrella of CLJ Commons, Lee Reed has worked relentlessly for more than a year to unify the two versions of rewrite CLJ and to make them cope better with the kind of Clojure code that is crafted today. Remember this picture the next time you want to fund a Clojure project. This is very, very important infrastructure. Some year ago, Ottedar summoned the cider and orchard teams and also development tooling people from all over into what we still call the DevTooling task force. This task force and the way we share and the way we help each other there has been a major enabler into shaping Calva into something that we can iterate quickly on and get value out to the users fast. That's how the Toolsmiths community rolls. We each have our individual missions and we all often form teams, more or less temporarily, to help each other and strengthen this or that part of the infrastructure, or to strengthen this or that detail of the user experience. And I would like to put your focus and attention on one such detail. Have you heard of DepTooling? My guess is that you haven't. It is one of those amazingly useful tools that the ever so productive Org2 provides for us. It is a drop-in replacement for the official Clojure CLI tools, and Calva uses its jar distribution in order to provide its getting started REPL. So equipped with only Java and Calva, you can start 3 Clojure REPL powered interactive guides that are aimed at teaching you the basics of Calva, of structural editing, and of Clojure itself. So this is how it works. Calva provides a command that's named fire up the getting started REPL. As with all VS Code commands, it lives in the command palette. When you start it, it opens up the 3 guides I told you about, and it starts the REPL, making them interactive. So this first guide focuses on evaluating code. So to define things and to experiment with your code in rich comment blocks, you use the command evaluate top level form. It is bound to option enter. And to evaluate other things, you use the command evaluate current form. Bound to Control Enter. And as I mentioned before, this Clojure token cursor is busy figuring out what is the current form all the time. Most often, of course, it is whatever the cursor is close to. So if I'm behind this string, Control Enter, it evaluates the string. And if I'm on this side of the string, Control Enter, it also evaluates this string. If I'm in front of this vector, it evaluates the vector. If I'm behind this symbol, it evaluates the symbol, which is not defined. So we get an error, which is visible here. You can always see more about it in the hover, and it's also printed here. And here we also get the option to print the stack trace. So of course we then instead use Alt Enter to define it and Control Enter to evaluate it. There is also a command for evaluating the current surrounding form. It is bound to Control-Shift-Enter. It is not mentioned in this guide though, in order to not overwhelm the beginner. What is mentioned in this guide, however, is that there is a command for evaluating up to the cursor, which is very handy in threads. So for instance, if we have this structure and we have this function defined, then I can use this command to evaluate the thread up to where the cursor is with the Control-Option-Enter. And now I pick out ratings, the values, and yeah, this is a very good game. There is also a short introduction to the debugger here. So you might recognize this particular example, which doesn't need a debugger, but we are using it here to introduce it anyway. So if you evaluate this form the normal way and then call it, that works. But calling it like this blows up. And then you might want to use the debugger then to figure out where it actually happens. So then you can, instead of using the normal evaluation of it, you can use the instrument for debugging command, Control-Alt-C, and then I for instrument. So now it's instrumented for debugging, and now when we call it, it will stop in the debugger, and it will show us the local variables here, and it will show whatever it has evaluated right now here in line. And then we can step. So now I'm stepping, wait for it, boom. Of course, that's where the bug was. So this is the debugger. And to uninstrument this so that you can call it without the debugger, you evaluate it the normal way, and then you can again call it. So that's the debugger. The next guide here introduces the structural editing of Calva, which I won't go into very deeply here, or almost not at all. But I hope you will check this out, and that you will also find that Calva has one of the richest implementation of power edit out there. I want to show you one little nifty thing though. Calva has this, and the Calva power edit has this, you can drag forms. You can drag forms in and out of other forms, but also just forward and backward. That's bound to option up and option down. That's nifty, I guess. Almost like that. But if you're inside a map or in a in a binding box or something like that, then you would like it to drag in pairs, right? And that's actually what happens. So if we use this command from in here, hold up then. So I can drag, and it drags the pair actually. And that of course goes for this pair as well. So now you know. The third guide here is where Calva says, welcome to Clojure. And it tries to build the fundamentals for a good start of your relationship with this language. The guide begins with introducing expressions, and then it goes on to literals. Maybe I should just browse it like this. Expressions, literals, then it goes on to just the strings, namespaces, it just touches it a bit. The literal collections, very shallow look at them there. Now a very shallow look at functions, just introducing this thing with a function position. And then it goes on to establish the role of special forms in Clojure. And after that, the role of the reader, which is a kind of a long chapter. It also has like macros, flow control, a deeper dive into functions. As you see, it is pretty long. And even if it is this long, and even if the scope of it is to be a basic introduction to Clojure, it is still so not done. I think the current line count is somewhere 2.5K, something like that. And I think that at least as many more lines need to be crafted in order for this guide to be complete to the scope that I have set up for it. It is a project of its own, and it lives in this repository here, which you find side by side with the Calva repository. So I am hoping that some of you will contact me and help me in making this guide the warm welcome to Clojure it should be. Because help is our modus operandi, right? Calva is the result of many people's hard work, dedication, and ingenuity. The Clojure community is fantastic in how it supports and encourages initiatives, and how helping each other is the default mode. And help is offered and provided in many ways. In the first Clojureverse post that I made about Calva, about a month after I had released it, I both show and tell that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think that when I posted this, I had yet fully realized just how far outside my comfort zone this initiative would bring me, and for how long. Long story short, there were moments of panic involved. I was in a big hurry to learn many new things. I can't really recommend, but if you are to place yourself in this situation, the Clojure community is the place to be. With the very patient help of experienced Clojure development toolsmiths, I got the help to grow my comfort zone to the fit. And now I wish I could say that I had learned my lesson, that I now would take things in smaller chunks and push more gently on the borders of what is comfortable. However, instead, I once more returned to digging a hole of panic for myself. It started like a stroke of fortune. Over the course of maybe 2 months, I got to help with some very fundamental things in Calva by a developer with mind-boggling capabilities. During this short time frame, mostly he, added the document mirror, the Clojure document, the Clojure lecture, the token cursor, complete new super powerful part-edit implementation, the start of the jack-in infrastructure, a complete rewrite of the nREPL client, and for the nREPL transport, a new bend code implementation, probably the most powerful one in the JavaScript world today. And on top of that, a shiny new REPL window, replacing the terminal integrations that I had used so far. Totally amazing. And we had so much fun during. This guy was not only a brilliant developer, he was also a very pleasant and fun and knowledge-sharing guy, and I learned so much during these 2 months. However, from one day to another, poof, I could no longer get in contact with him. It was as if he had been swallowed by the earth itself. It took me a while, but after a while, I had to face the fact that I was now alone with all these big, new and unreleased features added to the codebase. It was not just that they were not finished and still very bug-ridden. To large parts, I didn't understand them well enough. I spent many months in trying to understand and learn the modules in the depth that I needed to learn them, while trying to fix what needed to be fixed. And I was failing. I had never developed this kind of tech before. Fixing one thing seemed to either uncover or create some new errors. It was quite scary, if I put it that way. This was much, much worse than what I had experienced in the beginning of the project. Now I had thousands of users and I was battling at two fronts, trying to develop and maintain the current version of Calva, while at the same time trying to get the new version into something that even resembled a shippable state. The thought of scrapping the new version altogether struck me. But that made things feel even worse. I had invested far too much. And to be honest, that old version of Calva was boring to me. I didn't want that now that I knew what I wanted Calva to be like. So as I remember things, I was quite transparent with what I was working with and that I was having some troubles. But I'm pretty sure that I never said anything like, you know what, Calva friends? I fear that I am not going to pull through at all. Yet, there was someone there that figured this out anyway. Erik Asselm, you might know him as Slipset, started to engage more in the project. And one day he asked me, Peter, do you want my help to sort things out? The gesture alone chased most of my panic away, and I immediately accepted, and we started to have morning meetings. Erik was mostly rubber-ducking me. He had this way of starting me to reason out loud, and he asked me these questions that made me realize that I had gotten a lot of the version 2 material under control. Most of it, even. One morning, Erik asked me if I could see something that could be pulled out and pushed into version 1 of Calva and shipped that way. Yes, there was, and I actually knew which parts. And I pulled them out, and I pushed them in, and I shipped. So, with much less of the version 2 stuff in progress, things started to look much more manageable. Another morning, Erik asked me to list what I think really stopped version 2 from shipping. And that turned out to be a pretty small list, which Erik helped quickly to make me realize was even shorter. And now I was a developer with a plan again. And Calva version 2 was released June 19, 2019. Yes, it had a lot of course. And yes, it took me quite a while to stabilize it. We had to completely redo some things and completely remove others. But here we are, 2 years later. And Calva is a joy to maintain. And it has most of what you need to be productive as a Clojure developer. Thanks to the community's default mode of offering help, Brandon and I can now shift more of our time and attention to the beginner experience, to make Calva say, "Welcome to Clojure." Thanks for listening, clojureD. We have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe.
Thank you, Peter, for that presentation. It's been really interesting to see Calva and also like what should grow over the last years or so. How long have you been working on Calva now in total?
It is 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
The first release was in March 2018, right? So,
yeah.
So it's 3 years.
That's such a long time already, and like yeah, it's really cool to see how far it has come. Yeah, so I've got some questions from the community through Slack and GatherTown.
Yeah.
And so we could go through some of these, and then we'll see how far we get in the 10 minutes that we have now. So the first question was about the Calva debugger. And that's certainly been like a very impressive feature, just seeing in the local bindings like that. And the question specifically was if that is based on the CIDR debugger, or I guess generally how is that implemented?
Yeah, so it's totally the CIDR debugger that's powering it.
Yeah.
And then Brandon Rinch, who did the integration, of course, had to integrate with the VS Code debugger stuff. It also means that it only works for Clojure so far. But if someone wants to,
yeah, for Clojure and Clojure script is what you're
exactly. Yeah. So, but from what I hear from Botidar, it's not impossible to make it work in Clojure script. Someone needs to do it. So if someone out there feels up to it, then that would be super awesome actually to enable it in Clojure script.
Yeah, that's really cool. A debugger it's funny. I feel like I have used debuggers before, but there is it's a workflow. It's like working with the REPL, right? And so you kind of have to find the place for it in your work and everything.
And so I've seldom used the debugger myself, actually. I mean, I have this REPL workflow mostly, but I realized it when I was doing Advent of Code this year. For some problems, the debugger was like a savior. Like
I think it's really interesting to think about because the REPL is so powerful in some aspects, right? Like. Where is the spot for the debugger? I feel like that's an interesting kind of conversation to continue. So the other question that we got was, how does Calva determine whether it should move pairs, mapped or binding lists on single values up and down inside a form? Is there a way to add new forms that should work on a pair basis?
There is no way for the user to do it today. We could enable it for like the simple cases. So that is like we could just have you add whatever macro to a list, and we could work on those. But the thing is that it doesn't today work on some forms that we wanted to work in, like in a cond or cond threads and a couple of those. You would like it, but then it gets a bit complicated. We need to solve that first, and then we could probably add the configuration, more general configuration. I would assume it would be a bit similar to how you configure indentation. But it's a very good idea to do it. But today it's very hard coded. Okay, this is a let form, and then you just like modulo 2, and that's.
It's that kind of stuff is also it's really cool. Like the kind of stuff we've seen with rewrite CLJ and just like understanding code as data a bit more. I mean, I think that understanding has always been there, but I think tools like rewrite CLJ really make that accessible, right? And that you're also using rewrite CLJ in Calva.
I'm not using the rewrite CLJ directly. Actually, we use it for the formatter, so by proxy of the formatter and by proxy of using Clojure LSP. So that is using like CLJ condo, which in turn uses rewrite CLJ. So we have our own thing in Calva. It's called a token cursor. It's an old Lisp concept that we mostly used for navigating the Lisp structure, and it is kind of awesome, and it really gives you that feeling that this is data. This is code, but it's also data. Maybe you get an even stronger sensation of that when you write a macro or something. But even just working with this token cursor, it's enough to realize that it's
right. What can you just for me? I feel like I'm a little uninitiated on that. Like, how would you like different or draw the difference between like this token cursor approach and maybe something that is like more like rewrite?
So rewrite CLJ, I think, uses a more traditional, in a way, AST approach. It has this tree, and you walk in this. The zippers. While the token cursor it's actually just a long vector, or rather a TypeScript array of tokens. And then every time you move through this array, you use structural movement commands. So like down list, up list, backward, forward expressions are very similar to what you do in Calva or in other Poyadit implementations when you move in the code. So the token cursor moves the same way. It makes it very straightforward to implement Poyadit command because it's the same.
That sounds very actually like I have never used this token cursor thing, but I've like had a play with rewrite CLJ at some point, and it actually sounds somewhat similar what you're describing. Like it has this notion of like going down and up and right and left and this kind of stuff, which took me an awfully long time to grasp the first time I tried to understand it.
I think it's easier if in rewrite CLJ, because it actually does when you go down a list or something in rewrite CLJ. I imagine that really happens right in that structure. In the token cursor, that doesn't happen. We just move a cursor in this array, and always like figuring if we're in the list now. No, we're not yet. Now we're in the list. So it's a different what happens in the data structure. In the API, it's pretty similar. That's very interesting. It's definitely really cool, like to be able to do that kind of stuff. So I presented Calva at Seizure, a meetup in Seattle, and there I showed more of the token cursor. I don't think it's online yet. They said they should put it online. Okay. But, let's have a look for that, because if someone is interested, they should be seeing there. Then I show more of the token cursor. That's cool.
Magic. Maybe. I mean, it sounds like there is no link, but if the link, please share the link in like the clojureD channel once you have it.
Yeah, I will.
And maybe one last question, kind of to wrap it up. We have 2 more minutes before we're kind of transitioning to the next talk. I kind of was curious about your development experience building out Calva, right? Because I'm assuming there is like some stuff that is written in Clojure, some that is written in ClojureScript, and then you're also targeting this platform which is really built around JavaScript and I guess TypeScript to an extent.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you're like bringing all these things together and how that has been working for you.
Yeah, that's a super good way to frame it. So the most of Calva is written in TypeScript, so it's that's just a fact of things. Then we have parts of it written in ClojureScript, where you use we have like pure functions in the ClojureScript part, and then we use them as a library from the TypeScript part, and we could totally move a lot more code to ClojureScript for reasons that hasn't happened enough. But the experience, let's look at how you start. So it's so easy actually to start hacking on Calva. We have spent a lot of time to make that the easiest thing you can do. So you just like fork clone and then npm start and then F5 in VS Code, and it starts a new Calva session in like extension host is called. And then you can just modify it and try your modifications.
Yeah.
Of course, if you do it in the TypeScript part, then it's from that paradigm. It's like restart every time you need to try. If you modify the ClojureScript parts, then it's from our paradigm of things. And then you don't need to restart. It's hot reloading. Everything is happening.
Yeah. That's really cool. One very last short question. Where can people sign up for a Calva t-shirt?
Yeah, they can't yet. I should fix that. No, you like it?
I like it. I mean, I think there should be more t-shirts for editor extension.
Yeah, so I just created this one on some online t-shirt shop, right, for this occasion actually.
That's
but
cool.
I will try to bring it online for you. Yeah. Thank
you. Well, Peter, thank you so much. Sorry once again for the slight technical difficulties we had.
Don't worry about it.
We hope everyone enjoyed the talk, and we'll transition to the next talk now.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.